Good evening. How are you? Well, it's been too hot out today, and I had too much writing to do, so I lost the sunlight. So here I am, sitting and talking. Um, and I'm hoping that tomorrow will be a little cooler, or I'll get to the pool in the morning. There are lots of things going on. There are a couple of phenomenons that are interesting to me. Now, let's take uh, Vance, for example. He seems to pose a lot. And that fits the accusation he's getting that he's only interested in power, because how could you be against Trump and then support him? Although we have seen a number of people who get that fever and do that. And it seems to be to have access to power, to get some shedding off from whatever Trump will give you, however disloyal he may be down the road, that for that period of time you just take it on and live with it. But that's an inauthentic life. And we seem to have a lot of these people in politics, maybe elsewhere, but it's just so obvious in politics. The need to pose, and I don't even know what Vance's pose is, and because he's had so many in the number of years in too short an order, it's hard to tell if there is a genuine person there. I don't know if you followed Cillian Murphy, who's an amazing Irish actor. And it's interesting to watch him, because in the interviews he's doing now, it appears he's being himself, and he appears to be transparent to whom he is at the core in his soul. But he has that same ability to transform himself into these different parts. And it's like he puts on this persona, he lives it, and then he has to find a way to shed it, because it takes up into him something. Now, I don't think that Vance is anything as sophisticated than that. But we have also Trump, and Trump seems to be a diseased individual when it comes to this. So how do we deal with these people? I think we have to know that we can't believe a thing they said. Over the years, when I've been asked one question or another similar to this, what did you think about what Trump said? And I'd always say, well, he lies. So unless he's making an admission that impairs his own interest, you can't believe anything he says. It's always a manifestation of a manipulation of you for his best outcome. And that's just not, it's just not sufferable. So what's happening in the real world outside this world of myth-making and personas and posturing? Well, there are a couple of things that are coming down on Trump. First of all, we see the polls creeping upward for Kamala, and that's great news. And the funds are still coming in. And on top of that, there are going to be other breaks. But I think one of the things that's interesting is people always have trouble getting a handle on why is Trump able to command so much attention. And they say, don't the issues matter? And the truth is that for his group, the issues don't matter. It's an emotional commitment. It is a hypnotic belief that whatever Trump says is true, and if it's not true, it is a lever to get us where we want him, so that we don't have to deal with all these people who believe in liberal and progressive and left and new left and libertarian views. We want somebody who can cut through everything and get it done, and a dictatorship can do that. And so that's one prong of what American identity is about. The other is the one that we're closer to and believe in, and it makes the most sense for most of us, that is, we the people. And I'll explain. The wealthy, as I've said before, they can have their thumb on the scale all the time. And it requires a government pushing back, but the government doesn't push back unless we push the government. We've learned that over the years. It's gotten worse. The self-enlightenment notion that we might expect or believe is possible just doesn't happen. So what we have, ironically, is Trump has created this emotional band, if you will, with those who follow him. But here's something surprising. It appears that Kamala has a similar band, and that for whatever the issues are that bring us together, this is one-stop shopping, she brings an emotional reaction as well, and this is hard to beat. The question is, will it be sustained to the election? We have these naysayers who want her to say things committing her to business in a big way, thinking that matters. I almost wonder if that wouldn't have a dampening effect on the emotional effort that now helps her ride high in the water. Any of you who've ever surfed, and I haven't done any of the really complicated waves, but I did a little when I was younger. And what you sense is like a tugging at your toes that tell you if you start swimming now, you'll be able to jump up on the board. And I think that she must feel that, and even if she doesn't, instinctively, she's catching that wave. And we just have to hope that it keeps and proceeds in the direction to the end that we want. Now, on the ground, we have several things happening, which I think are advantageous. First of all, and I've mentioned this before, Judge Chutkan has the election interference case on her plate. And she's already catching Trump's attention because she's going to have a hearing on August the 16th. And she's asked the lawyers, how do they want to proceed? Now, I'm not the lawyer in the case, and maybe I would feel differently if I was in that context, because how you paint your participation in something may determine what you think about it. But I'd like to believe that if I were in that situation, what I would be doing would be dictating something. And this is why. When you see that the U.S. Supreme Court is ignoring the law, is being a bunch of political hacks, is on the cuff receiving money that directly relates to the cases they're deciding, you see that we have a crooked system at the highest levels of our court system. And if we don't have trust for our court system, we have chaos. And how do we get that? Well, that's a larger question, and part of the answer is winning this election. But the other question is, what do you do if you're in a position like, say, Judge Chutkan, and you have this case before you with a rotten opinion that grants immunity to a president under certain circumstances? Unconstitutional, unsatisfactory, something that can only apply in a dictatorship. And we, the people, for the role we play and want to play and for the freedom we need to have, require a democracy, one that allows us to participate, one that recognizes that the increased participation of us is the only check on the government and the check, therefore, on the wealthy, who would have their way if it wasn't for us. So what we have here is Judge Chutkan looking at the case. What should she be doing? I think, since the two things that are apparent from this opinion, one, the president has immunity, outrageous, the only thing that could possibly correspond to a dictatorship. But number two is that the context of this was to delay as much as possible. So how does a righteous, ethical person who is not going to take the low road combat somebody and something and people in our government, the Supreme Court, who are compromising the notion that all men are equal, all men and women are equal, and that in addition, that justice delayed is justice denied. And that's particularly true when you don't have a legitimate cause except to delay a prosecution, hoping that if you win the election, then given that this is a federal election, that you can compromise it and turn it away. So, well, what can a judge do in that case? The judge can move the case. That's what I think. So I don't know that that's her thinking, but on August 16th, they're in court. What if she set the trial for September 15th, September 30th? How long would the trial take? Would she think that she has to protect Trump from the vagaries of a trial because that's the only fair way to do it. Is that the only fair way to do it? Because Trump did everything he could to push us into this cul-de-sac in which there's an election facing us and there's limited time to do what's necessary to try the case. So if I were in court, I'd tell the lawyers, I want you to give me your arguments in week 1. We'll decide them in week 2. If there's any reason to continue to go to trial, we shall, and we'll start September 15th. Will we finish it? Whether we finish it or not, we're going to start it. We're going to do it. It's going to happen. Would I have extensive hearings? No, we already know what the facts of the case are. We know that the law is bogus, but we have to find a way to define it, that is, for the purposes of deciding it so we can go forward with the case. I hope that made sense, but that's my thinking. That's how I think I would do that. And the Florida case, we have our special counsel has an argument on August the 27th to counteract what Judge Luce Cannon did in that case. In New York, another criminal case, D.A. Bragg's case, we have a fair but perhaps not a perfect trial, and that's all that anyone can ask. And so Trump is trying to claim that the Supreme Court decision on immunity saves him from the conviction that the jury awarded, and saves him from the sentencing on September the 18th, when it's presently scheduled. I think that the way to legitimately combat something that's unjust and wrong is to come up with something that is right and perhaps isn't frequently used, that puts us in a position to fight what was wrong, but to do it legitimately, whereas what they did was not legitimate. There's also some good news out of Arizona. Jenna Ellis, who is Trump's attorney, is going to cooperate in the prosecution of the false electors, and that's in Arizona. In that case, if you remember, Giuliani is a defendant, and so is Meadows, a former chief of staff of Trump. So that's a pretty interesting change there. The electors seem to me to be in a different case. And, you know, when we go, let's talk about the Supreme Court again a little bit. The Supreme Court is supposed to be a body that can not just defend, but give out a clarion call to embrace their decisions because, first of all, we trust them, and because the decisions make sense to us. Now, you might say, isn't that politics? Well, it's not entirely, but it is partially, and it is an organ of government, when working right, moves slowly because it has to move the mass of humanity that is America. But when you do something like take a 50-year precedent involving abortion, and you throw it over in a single decision without any prospect of it adapting and changing in a way that makes sense to the public, and it appears only politically to compromise women, you have one thing. When you see an opinion that reverses common sense and is without precedence, like saying that Trump has immunity, then he becomes, probably in his mind, a god, but in our mind, a dictator, a person that is intolerable in the scheme of our history and our progression from our founding until now. So we're at a position now where we have to look at that court, and we're on notice that not only do they seem to be corrupted in their decisions, and we're talking about the 6, we are also looking at them being individually corrupted by gifts and so forth that they don't report. So even as I speak to you today, there were additional gifts that Justice Thomas had, going back to, I think, 2010. But still, why are we finding out about these things now, and why did it take so long? And why is this man sitting on decisions that relate to the subject matter that he's discussed and appear to be related to all those people who've given him favors? And from my own experience, there's a member of Congress I've liked since before he was a member of Congress. And his name's Bobby Scott. He's a congressman in the Beach area in Virginia. And when I was on the Hill, we were having a conversation on the phone one day, and he said that he was now the chairman of, I believe it was the crime subcommittee on the Judiciary Committee. And he said he's going to have to get a counsel. And I said, well, how about me? And he said, well, maybe. I mean, we get along, we have similar thoughts and so forth. And so Bobby said, when can we talk about it? I said, what's your schedule? I said, well, I go over to the cafeteria. I said, well, why don't we meet there and we'll talk about it. So I got there a little bit ahead of him, and I was online. And while I was online, he said that he wanted a container of milk. And I said, I'd get him one. And so I come to the table and I give him the container of milk. And then he says, well, how much was that, John? I have to pay you. I said, no, forget it. It's just a container of milk. No. He wanted to pay me. Now, this is a man, in my opinion, for whom I have enormous respect, for his integrity and for his ability as a lawyer. And his way of dealing with ethical questions is a no-tolerance level for anything that in any way could be taken as him taking some advantage of his position. Now, obviously, we're both longer in the tooth when this is happening on the Hill, but and my position as special counsel at that time to the Judiciary Committee and stuff like that, you would think I wouldn't have thought anything of it as just as I spoke. And as for the conversation about getting that position, he says, John, he's a black congressman. He says, I probably should have a black person fill that position. And I said, you think so? I said, yeah. I said, well, I can do black. So I think he was right. And the guy that he chose has been with him forever, and I've worked with him, and he's just a natural fit. And I didn't have long enough to get so eagerly ambitious for the position, seeing as how I just learned about it. We just had lunch together, which we've done on other occasions. It's a long way to say that you either have the character or you don't, and it gets stronger if you practice it. Obviously, Bobby has a no tolerance for any kind of gift rule for himself. Makes absolute sense. So what is wrong with a guy like Thomas? It means he never had that. It means he's always been a schemer. How do we clear these people to be on the Supreme Court when they have the ethics of a snake? They just are intolerant of the values that we hold high for our elected officials. So where do I see us? Well, I don't know if by the time you hear this, you'll know who is the vice presidential chick, the vice presidential selection by Kamala. But with that selection, with her momentum, with the emotion supporting her, we're in a good place right now. Trump can't get his standing anymore and seems to be doing crazier things. Vance is tied around his neck and nagging him as well. And Trump has said something like, well, it's the top of the ticket that matters. Well, you can tell that to McCain about Palin, I suppose, if you can get into the nether regions and bring up this discussion. I like the way things are going. I hope they continue in this direction. But I would like it to be a little cooler so I can go around outside. So I appreciate, I may have gone on a little bit. Apologies. I hope you found it interesting, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. All the best. Bye-bye.